Where does gratitude come from? As a survivor of the disease of addiction to alcohol and drugs, over the last 9 years, as my disease has gone into remission, I've asked that question often because every day that I wake up, I'm grateful for being able to stand here. And what I thought over time was that gratitude for me, that I felt every day, the gratitude that I got to express every day, I thought that came from, there we go. I thought that came from the disease that I suffered through. I thought that's what gave me the gratitude. But as time passed and I began to get my life back in order, what I began to understand and realize is that my journey began here, in this community, in Sioux Falls. My recovery journey and my journey to wellness began in this community. And what hit me was, this is where I got gratitude. This is where I learned that feeling. This is where generosity was shown to me in bunches by people who I knew and those that I didn't. This is where that generosity resulted in opportunities. Opportunities that don't usually come to a felon, that don't usually come to somebody who suffers through the disease of drug and alcohol addiction. Those opportunities turned into joy, happiness, a new life. And from that happiness grew out my gratitude. And so it was right here in this community. And from this community is where I was able to get a sense of something that I want to call an ecosystem of good. And I think Thomas Jefferson, if I can figure out the clicker, I think Thomas Jefferson back in 1790 hit it on the head when he talked about a system of ethics that if you have gratitude, if you have faith in all of your engagements, that you will keep them, and that you will have generosity within your community, that both the individual and the community will be good and will grow. That's what I experienced in Sioux Falls, starting in 2006. This community has an ecosystem of good, and it gave back to me in ways that I could measure, that I could see, in ways that I couldn't see, in the ways that are still coming back to me 9 years later. And so, as I thought about this over time and began to think about my journey through this disease that for an individual is horrible. For more than 12 years, I experienced some of the darkest of days. My family was also in that pit of darkness. I was lonely. I felt nothing but sadness most of the time, suffering from depression. In public, I was anxious most of the time. Even as a professional radio broadcaster, every day getting on the air, it was nothing but being anxious throughout my life. And for more than 12 years, I had to fight through these feelings of inadequacy and not having the confidence to succeed on my own. I ruined my family connections. I lost loved ones. I lost the job that I thought was my career as a broadcaster. Because in 2004, I got my 4th DUI. And they had to let me go. They had already suffered through 3 of them and kept me around. Talk about generosity. I got to keep that job that made me, that was my identity in the community, interviewing U.S. senators and presidential candidates and CEOs and industry tycoons in Grand Forks, North Dakota. I was on the top of the world, but every day I got up, I did my show, and every night I passed out in a drunken stupor. That was my life for 12 years. The funny thing about this disease is it doesn't discriminate, and it doesn't care where you are. And it picked me up, it chewed me up, and it spit me out in Winter, South Dakota. That was in April of 2005. In June, I picked up my 5th DUI. My 5th DUI in 8 years. In South Dakota, that meant a 3rd offense felony DUI. I walked into Judge Trandle's courtroom, as she described, looking like a tomcat dragged behind a car or a truck for 2 weeks. She did not know what to do with this man. She knew I was a failure of the system, that I wasn't the failure. The system failed me. That over the course of 4 DUIs in more than 12 years, that I did not once go to inpatient treatment, that I was in and out of courtrooms and in and out of jails, and I never got the help that I needed. Here was this guy. He had a family who drove down with a truck and a U-Haul to pick up his stuff because they knew their son was not going to come out of that jail. This judge didn't know what to do. Like the other 20 people that I was standing next to in that courtroom that day in September of 2005, she was confused because all of them looked exactly like me on paper, but not by the color of our skin, not by our experiences. I had work experience, I had financial capabilities, I had college experience. How does that person end up in her courtroom? If she put me in prison, her fear was I'd never come out. And if I did come out, I wouldn't survive much longer after that. So she took a chance. Judges aren't generous. And she wasn't being generous when she said, here's the deal, Mr. Whitesock. You're pretty fortunate that you've showed up in my courtroom in this time because the state of South Dakota has some new tools. I was in Winter, one of 3 counties, Tripp County, that was a pilot county for the 24/7 sobriety project. Twice daily breathalyzers for anybody who's arrested for a second DUI or greater. She said, you're going to get 5 years on probation. For every day of that probation, you're going to blow into a tube twice a day. Get used to it. And boy, did I did after 947 days. As far as I know, I'm the longest person who's ever done the 24/7 sobriety project, blowing into a tube twice a day. She said, you're going to do that. You're going to go to AA every single day. You are going to go to jail for 180 days, and you're going to have 2 years in prison hanging over your head. So don't screw up. You're going to go to inpatient treatment. For the first time in your life, you're going to go to inpatient treatment. Okay. And she said, you're going to go to inpatient treatment, and you're going to come up with a plan for your life for the next 365 days, and you're going to come back to this courtroom, you're going to stand before me, tell me you have a plan, and maybe I'll let you out early. So I went to Yankton, and I got a plan. Someone gave me a name, and I don't know who this person is, but they gave me a name of somebody in Sioux Falls, and they said, talk to this guy. He knows something about a sober home in this town. And I got on the phone, I begged and I pleaded from the Human Services Center, and when I couldn't really get that deal done from treatment, I had to go back to the jail where I was a trustee in the basement, and I got the deal done on a crappy phone next to a bunch of big brooding guys in the basement who were building the new jail and scared the dickens out of me. But they were some of the nicest guys in the world. And finally I got on that phone, and this guy, Tom, said, you know what? We got a room for you. Go back to the judge, we'll give her the paperwork, and you can come to Sioux Falls. So I did that. Judge Trandle didn't know about sober homes. This is kind of a new concept in South Dakota. And so on January 28th of 2006, my parents drove down from Grand Forks, 10 hours, picked me up. We left the jail and went straight to Sioux Falls, where I showed up to the sober home at 26th and Minnesota. And that's when I met Kevin Kirby. It was just in passing. He was really there just to kind of make sure I was okay, make sure I was getting settled in. I don't think he normally did that. He collected my check, which I know he didn't normally do. And there I was in Sioux Falls. 2 weeks later, my introduction to this community was, when my parents showed up, of course, I had to do this every single day in this town. But in order to get down the street to go and do that, I had to get on my bike and ride the 20 blocks down Minnesota Avenue. And it was a February day, it had just snowed, and I got really good at riding my bike in the snow. And I'm going down that street, and I see this car coming kind of up the hill. I'm 2 blocks away. I could see the jail door from here. And I look at the guy, and he sees my eyes, I see his eyes, and I think he's going to stop. But nope, he turns into the parking lot, and he hits me. I got hit in the back tire, so I went sliding down the hill. I wasn't hurt. I picked up my bike and I walked back up the hill. And there he was waiting for me in the parking lot. He asked, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I am." And then he started walking up into the laundromat where a woman was standing there and she was looking a little worried. And I grabbed my bike and I walked up to follow him because I wasn't going to let this guy out of my sight. And before I could get in the door, he was walking out, got in his car and left. Red flags. I had a cell phone because my parents, they bought me the bike when I got to Sioux Falls, they got me clothes, and they made sure I had a cell phone. Talk about generosity after what I did to them. I got on the phone, called the police. Within 3 minutes, they found the guy. He was just a couple blocks away, brought him back. What I learned was he was wanted for a 4th DUI. This was going to be his 5th. And he was drunk at the time. And as we're standing there and the officers were getting information from me, one of them said, "Can I take you somewhere? Where were you going?" And I paused. And then I looked at my watch and I said, "I got 10 minutes to get down there. I got to blow into a tube." Again, pause, because it was awkward. Could they laugh at this? And there was raucous laughter. And it was a female officer, and she said, "This is wonderful. This is just gold." And she went back, grabbed my bike, put it in the trunk of the police cruiser, and she goes, "I suppose this is going to be new for you. You want to sit in the front seat?" So I sat in the front seat, and we drove the 2 blocks, and she goes, "I'm going to wait here for you like a taxi cab. Go do what you got to do." She goes, "I'm willing to bet you're going to blow zeros. And when you come back, I'm going to ride you back to where you live." Where do you live? I live in a sober home. And while this was going on, what I didn't know is that someone was running my record, because they had my information. And we got in the car, and she goes, "Really, is this your 3rd DUI?" And I said, "No, you're not seeing 2 of them. I got 2 more." And she thought that was funny, ha-ha. Not funny because it's really not that funny. And then when she dropped me off, she said, "Just so we're clear, I can share this with everybody down at the station, right?" I said, "Absolutely, it's your story. You've got the rights to it." That was my introduction to Sioux Falls. I got a job on one of the local radio stations, a part-time job because nobody else would hire me. And, life was getting back on track for me. And very quickly, I found my way to the University of South Dakota, got a degree in history. And while I was there, I found inside of me this passion. Because through that generosity and through that opportunity that was given to me, I was able to find my purpose and I was able to find my passion. And so I advocated for the disease, for addiction care and for mental health issues while I was at the University of South Dakota. And while I was there, I met a woman. She was a professor, Sandy McEwen. She taught a constitutional law class. And we had to stand up in class and I had to make an argument. And after the end of the class, she asked me, "What do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "I think I'm going to go back into broadcasting." She said, "Absolutely not. You should try out for the mock trial team. And let's see if that doesn't work out for you." She goes, "You're really good on your feet." And I tried that. And then she came back to me and said, "You need to become a lawyer. You would be really good at the public defender's office. You would do so much good." And I thought about that. I said, "Well, if there's this thing, this felony," she says, "We'll work through that." And so every summer, the next summer, we actually went back and she drove from Sioux Falls to Winter, South Dakota to testify at 9:30 in the morning. The judge thought that was the most remarkable thing. She was really kind of wondering, how did you get somebody to do that for you? Thinking that people who are addicts are pretty good at manipulation. She was not quite with me yet. But I I sent a letter to the judge every 3 months updating where I was at and what I was doing. Needless to say, I changed my career path and I wanted to get to law school. That was a bit difficult to do. I applied to 7 law schools. Every single one of them said no, but the University of South Dakota said, "We have this problem for those of you on the bubble who didn't do so well on the LSAT and maybe don't have good grades and, oh, by the way, might be a felon. Come hang out for 6 weeks over the summer, take 2 classes of very obscure law. You'll know it backwards and forwards. So if you got any questions about what happens if you shoot a deer and it crosses over a property line, I can help you in that situation." Who owns the deer, right? Okay. I joined that program, 6 weeks, 33 of us sweating it out every single day, people stealing books. It was a horrible experience. I was number 5. The 10 of us got spots. I got into law school. 2 months into law school, I saw the drinking culture amongst the legal profession. It scared the hell out of me because there I was 3 years into my recovery, and I'm about to go down this path of a group of people who had the highest incident rate of suicide, depression, and addiction. And so I wrote a column because I'd worked at the student newspaper, and so I just said, I'm going to say something about this. And headline was, legal profession has a problem with the drinking culture. And to this day, there are lawyers who won't talk to me. And that's okay. But I started a conversation. So 4 years later now, there's a mental health week. They do something each semester to talk about mental health and addiction issues. And so I guess that's my lasting legacy there, that I get to leave back as my generosity and gratitude to the law school. And so this past August, I got the wonderful opportunity to go back to Winter and stand in this courtroom again. This happened because the ecosystem of good in this community, people who didn't know they touched my life, impacted it for the rest of my life. Now, when I tried to apply for a bunch of jobs in law firms and nobody would hire me, and I knew that was the case, the last two names on my networking list were Kevin Kirby and Charlie Day. I did not want to be looking like I was begging for a job. But I sent them a note and said, I know you guys know a bunch of people. Can you help me out? Some leads. They invited me up, and this August of 2012, I started working for an organization called Face It Together. Now I get to wake up every single day and be generous for the community that I come to live in and fight this disease of addiction head on. This community is amazing. It is got so much good in it, and it doesn't even know it because it's built into the fiber of your being. It saves lives every single day. It changes lives every single day. I'm just this kid from North Dakota who suffered a horrible disease and got chewed out and spit up right here in South Dakota and got to turn my life around. The ecosystem of good changed my life. And for that, I am eternally grateful. And now I get to turn that around and be generous and create new opportunities for other people. And I will always thank you for that.